Hey guys, this is James from TeaDB bringing you Inbetweenisode number 114. This is going to be an extended Inbetweenisode, talking a little bit more about different tea concepts, show you a couple different visual angles of this tea as we drink it. So today's episode is specifically going to talk about grandpa style tea, what that is, what that means, and it's probably a more common style of drinking tea in somewhere like China than Gongfu style, which we use on the show is. So the tea, I'm going to have it a couple different ways, is the Brown Changtai from Toby's box. I have a cake of this, a single cake of this. It's a nice, simple daily drinker for myself. It's undergone some light traditional storage. So I'm going to be treating this to both grandpa style and Gongfu style brewing. First we're going to go to grandpa style. So we are going to talk a little bit about grandpa style brewing right here. So as you can see, there's a lot of different stuff on this table. So first of all, it's the cake that we were just looking at, the Brown Changtai. It's here. It's from 2003. It's undergone some somewhat humid storage, like traditional storage. I think it was stored in Hong Kong, or at least Hong Kong, sort of more humid conditions for at least some period of time. I have drank this tea both Gongfu style and grandpa style, and I enjoy it both ways. So first off, I'd like to give credit where credit is due. So please check out Marshallin. He has a post, a big post on grandpa style. I'd say it's probably the best guide to it. He also has a number of supplemental posts about like tips and stuff like that towards grandpa style brewing. Here we have the opportunity to visually show a little bit more on how it works. Teas that it generally works well with are teas that aren't going to get super, teas that you don't really have to brew around like lots of bitterness or lots of sourness and stuff like that. So older teas tend to do well, aged oolongs tend to do well. I've had decent success with some traditionally stored teas. And so here we have the cake. And so usually if you're going from scratch, there's a couple different ways to do this. If you're going from scratch like this, you'll want to use obviously much less leaf than you would for an ordinary Gongfu session. If we were, for instance, it's also a very good way to finish off a set of leaves after a Gongfu session. I had a different video on that where I think I used the YQH Qijong for it. So definitely, and there you could use perhaps a little bit more leaves. There's also a couple different vessels that you could use. So we are getting 2 grams here. Normally you probably wouldn't measure this because this tends to be a casual style, but for the sake of consistency, because I tend to do these things, I will measure it here. So we're getting a little bit over 1 gram here. So ordinarily I'd maybe use 5 grams of this for a 75 milliliter device. So a couple different vessels you could use. You could use a thermos. This is a Zoji Rushi thermos. Or you could just use a regular old mug. Why not? Most people have something like this lying around. Just dump the leaves in. And then we will pour the hot water in. Got some boiling water here. So you can see the leaves are moving around a little bit. I'm going to get this cake out of the way. So you can see leaves here moving around. So generally what you'll want to do is you'll want to wait until the leaves sink to the bottom. So you can see that some of the leaves here on the bottom have already gone to the bottom, whereas a couple of these leaves are still lingering on the top. Usually if they do not sink to the bottom, that means that your water is not hot enough. I think this water is plenty hot, and I think these leaves will slowly sink. And then once it's at an appropriate temperature, you can sip on it casually. Usually what you'll do, especially if you want to drink more tea, is you'll wait till the cup gets to maybe about halfway, and then you will fill it back up with boiling water or close to boiling water. It's a really great way to casually drink tea throughout the day. This is a lot of people's preferred style of workplace brewing. So easy to do there because all you need access to really is some tea leaves, boiling water, and a mug. So a little bit different angle here. I am now drinking this tea at my kitchen table. This is the grandpa style brew. I've waited maybe 5 minutes or so, just a little bit, for the tea to cool off. And so since then, the leaves that had been hovering at the top of the glass have fallen all the way to the bottom. So I look in the glass now. The leaves are there. They're on the bottom. So I don't even need to strain these leaves with my mouth, which you could also do if you wanted, and sometimes you'll have to do that, especially for stems. And I don't know if I mentioned where I got this tea or not, but it's from Toby, so thank you, Toby. It was in one of his boxes, so really good, just daily drinker tea. So cheers, guys. So it's got a decent body, it's smooth, some of that sort of camphorated woody taste to it. Not really any bitterness at all, so really easy to drink under these parameters, and I would say that these parameters are suiting the tea just fine. The leaves look to be of the bigger sort. Toby compared this tea to a poor man's 8582, which is the dye recipe that uses larger leaves than something like a 7542 or 7532, and the comparison makes sense to me at the very least. Leaves sort of a sweet filling here. There's a little bit of mouth cool going on. Not overly complicated at all. And I think for grandpa style, there's just not really too much of a reason to overcomplicate it. As with all things, you can make it as complicated as you want. Show you just my simple setup here. But I think a big part of the appeal of grandpa style is that it's just so damn easy, so easy to do. So as you can see, I'm starting to sip through a good chunk of my mug, and just to sort of illustrate how you would continue the session if you wanted, would be to just add some boiling water here. The leaves will get a little bit agitated. Right now they're sort of like flowing through the glass. Eventually, if you are using hot enough water, they should settle onto the bottom. You can also do this sort of brewing with a thermos. So many different ways to do this style of brewing. Usually a taller mug or something like that will work best. Sometimes if you do something too small, it could be a little bit clunky, or you might have to strain the leaves a little bit more with your mouth. But for this tea, the leaves have already, for this go around, the leaves have already settled on the bottom very quickly, much quicker than the initial steep. So, and if you want to just like let it sit for a little bit, let the leaves to absorb a little bit more of the flavor, you just give it a little bit more time. Definitely a recommended style, especially if you're looking for a work time setup. I have the privilege of being able to work from my house, so I am able to gong-fu style throughout the day, and I am well aware that not everyone is able to do that, so I definitely recommend this sort of style, especially with older pu'erhs, ripe pu'erhs, whatever. So now we are going to move on to the gong-fu style part of this. Back to the tea table, you could see that we are back at the normal setup for the in-betweenisodes in my apartment, and we have the same tea, the Brown Changtai from 2003 going, Gongfu style. And this is just to show that different aspects of the tea will be brought out by brewing it different ways. So Gongfu style can also vary dramatically depending how you're doing it. Gongfu style, what sort of parameters, what's your water, etc. But this versus grandpa style is just going to inherently bring out different aspects. So as you see, we still have this cup over here. I have consumed one steep of this Brown Changtai already. One of the nice things about Gongfu style is that depending on the tea, it can just vary a lot steep to steep, and so you can really watch the evolution of the tea if it changes. Some teas change more than others. It should definitely be noted. So I'm using 5 grams for 75 milliliters, so much closer to my normal brewing. It's a lot of sweet tree, woody smells to it. Maybe a little bit of pine. Some of that camphor that was noted earlier. And cheers, guys. There's definitely a touch sour, maybe a little bit of bready, woody notes to it as well. Second steep right there. It has a different sort of mouth feel than your grandpa styled cup over here. I'm going to go ahead and brew this one more time. This is also, I think, a tea that can be pushed fairly heavily, and I feel that way about 8582 compared to some of the smaller leaf dye recipes as well, that you can tend to push it a little bit more depending on the parameters. So I didn't push it too hard, but a little bit longer than the flash steep. Alright, cheers guys. So a little bit more bitterness in this, something that was not at all present in the Brown Changtai from the previous one. It's definitely not the bashing over the head bitterness. The Gongfu, for instance, from last episode was far more bitter than this tea. It's got a nice rounded body to it. Again, picking up on some of those camphoristic aspects to this. And for curiosity's sake, let's go back to our grandpa style, see how this goes. So it's softer, there's definitely none of those bitter edges around it. It tastes a little bit lighter, a little bit thinner than the Gongfu third steep that we're having right now. Sweeter. This would be easier to just throw it back and chug all the way, so easier to drink. But perhaps a bit simpler for the grandpa style tea. So finishing steep 3. So definitely more active, more pine, just more bitterness all around. It's lingering far more sort of on the roof cavity of my mouth. And here is steep number 4. So pushed a little bit. We're getting, I would say, more of a orangish red rather than a reddish orange. So it's a little bit closer to red. At least that's what it looks like in my cup right here. So still pretty strong. Definitely compared to the grandpa style tea, this tea is noticeably stronger and more bitter, which makes a lot of sense because we are using 5 grams of leaf. Even though we're steeping it for such a short time, we're using 5 grams of leaf here versus 1 gram here. So it's different. It's definitely stronger here for this particular setup, but you could of course adjust your grandpa style parameters to go upwards. So there are just a lot of different variances method to method. One last thing I'd like to touch on is Denny and I did bring a Brown Changtai from Toby on from 2003, and we kind of offhandedly joked about barcode, no barcode, and talked about some of the different versions. And I should note that this is a different version and a different storage parameter than that tea, and I like this one much better. But it's also very different, and so I think it emphasizes that, you know, even within the same tea, this 2003 Brown Changtai from this year, you can have a lot of different teas and a lot of different experiences despite it being that tea from that year. So that's the last thing I wanted to say. So thank you guys for tuning in to this extended In-Betweenisode. Let me know how you liked it. Let me know if you want to see more things like this. Any topic suggestions are always welcome, especially if they are Pu'erh related or tea genres that I'm particularly interested in. So suggest the white and the green stuff for the normal episodes. Suggest Pu'erh related topics for these In-Betweenisodes. So thank you guys as usual for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time. Cheers.